Hello and welcome to the ultimate League of Legends esports content opportunity of the entire competitive calendar year, North American Academy Power Rankings. I actually really enjoy Academy. I really like investing time and effort into covering it, and this year amateur as well with all the ecosystem changes. And I'm just really excited about what's going on in Academy, what's going on in amateur, where it's all headed. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk through my expectations for the Academy year, how I feel about the rosters that the LCS orgs have put together in Academy. So I'm going to go through this list from a couple different angles. I'm going to present these in the reverse order of my power rankings for them for the spring split, meaning where do I think they will finish competitively by the end of the spring split, by the Proving Grounds tournament. But along with that, I'm going to put probably the more important piece, which is a grade for how well constructed I feel the roster is as a development tool for the org. How much it's going to create talent depth, how much it already, to some extent, possesses talent depth for the team, but also how much it's going to, develop players and realize potential in the players that they have and actually improve their level up to the point of, in theory, qualifying players into the LCS in the future. So we're going to go through that, and I'm just going to start with the first team, which competitively I am ranking an expected 10th, but that's not necessarily the development grade I have for them. So that team is Counter Logic Gaming. The roster they're running, Thien, you have Griffin, who was formerly called Wiggly, you have RJS, who was formerly called Deus, you have Katsuri, and you have Hooks, who was formerly called Otto. So I think this roster is going to probably struggle a little bit. My expectations on it are a little bit, you have to factor in that a lot of these players coming from the OPL, I don't have the best read on. And I should caveat all of this with the fact that, Academy is going to be naturally much more volatile than I think the LCS, because we know less about the players coming in. There is so much space for potential and, unknowns, and how much are they going to improve over time. And also just that these are players coming out of leagues that I personally haven't been able to invest as much time into scouting. So that being said, Thien and Katsuri are both coming from Oceania. RJS is switching from top lane back to mid, which he used to play. Hooks has been in Academy before as a bot laner, but switched to support, played support for most of 2020, and is now back in Academy. So I think, I'm okay with Griffin coming back and being a little bit of a veteran anchor here. I think he's still young enough and still has enough potential in him that he's even a little bit of a developmental piece. And I think, I've written an article before in 2020 about how I thought he was one of the more underrated players, and was not that I thought that he was, really being victimized by his team or anything like that, but he never had any winning lanes to play through. I thought he was better than he looked, but in fairness, he did look pretty bad. So, overall with this roster, I think there's some opportunity to give them the benefit of the doubt that they have room to improve, they have room to grow. I like that they have gone, fairly unproven. They don't have like ex-LCS players in here other than Griffin. It's more potential oriented. So while I think they're going to struggle competitively, I give them a B- in development. I think there is some potential here. I think they have some room to grow, but I do wish there was more like actual, like raw, completely unproven talent here that hadn't already spent time in Academy or spent time in a pro league like the OPL. That's my main the main thing holding me back from giving them better than a B- here. At 9th, I have Immortals. So their Academy roster is going to be Tapoon, Potluck, Pretty, Keith, and Joey. Now, Tapoon is coming from the Oceanic Pro League as well. Potluck has been in Academy for a bit. Pretty is coming out of the European National Leagues scene. You know Keith very well. And Joey is kind of making his return in after having a brief stint, showing up with Team Liquid at MSI, I believe. And now he's kind of trying to earn his way back in. So I think, I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about Pretty. I haven't really had a chance to watch him play, but, from speaking to other people who do know him, it seems like he's got some pretty good potential. He's been around the European scene for a couple of years. So, I'm looking forward to learning more about him. I think there might be a piece there that, could potentially challenge Insanity and push him a little bit. I wonder if he was brought in more as like a potential LCS rookie promotion project, like a player development project, versus somebody that we're familiar with and we want to push Insanity and, compete for the job kind of thing. I'm not sure what their approach was there. Potluck is a player who I think still has some unrealized potential as well, but has had a little bit of time to find it already, so he's not like a fresh new face completely. Joey, I think, the support pool, the talent in North America for bringing up new supports and developing them is pretty thin right now and has been for a little while. So, I don't mind them bringing him in. I think he does show like he's on the right trajectory, but not a completely fresh face either. So I think, there are some things here that could go the right direction. This is by no means, like a poor academy project overall that doesn't know where it's going or doesn't have any players to develop. But overall, I think there's a little too much indexing on prior experience. There's a little too much of a vibe of these are players who we think can challenge our LCS roster and try to take their spots, which I kind of get that, but it's not really what I would love them to be going for. I'd love them to be going a little harder for, completely fresh faces and growth and improvement. When they have someone like Revenge and Insanity and LCS, back that up with more, keep the way, have another wave coming in behind them rather than people who are going to, challenge their spots with a little more experience. So overall, I give them a C+ development grade. And I think I'm not like disappointed with the direction they're going with it. I think there are some positives here, but I'm not overwhelmed with like the opportunities they've created for themselves as an org either. We'll see how it works out. At 8, I have Team Liquid. So they are running with Jenkins. They've retained him from last year. They're using Armeo, who has been subbing in the lock-in tournament, was formerly called Grig. They have Harry coming in from the OPL. They have Yeon, who was on 100 Thieves Next last year. And they have Ayla coming in from the OPL. So Team Liquid, there's... Yeon is the real prospect here, I would say. He looks like he has some decent potential. I wouldn't say he's like top tier prospect who could be really amazing, but he's got some potential there and might be able to break through, especially playing alongside Ayla, who by all accounts is a very good player. There is, some points that they earn for having a player of Ayla's quality in the academy team, and that's like a resource, but it's only a resource in the sense that they might be able to sell him onwards in the future because nobody in the league is going to take away Core JJ's spot. The only reason Team Liquid move on from Core JJ is if he decides he's done, I think. And so I don't think Ayla is the kind of... And if Core JJ moves on from Team Liquid, they're going to go out and spend big money on the next big import support or whatever it is, right? They're going to bring in the support equivalent of Centaur or whatever it's going to be. So Ayla is a good player from what I know, but he doesn't really make sense to me unless he's going to be like a mentor for younger players here. So maybe that's the goal with him and Yeon. Harry, I've watched him a little bit. He might grow on me more over time. I think he's not going to be one of the best mid laners in Academy, but he is at least a player with room to grow and develop, right? Which is generally what I'm looking for here. Jenkins, kind of a similar story. He's been around Academy for a little while. He's kind of incrementally improving. He's never going to take away Alfari's spot. And I don't know that he's been improving fast enough yet that he's like, a piece to sell on later. But obviously Team Liquid do believe in him. They brought him to Worlds, let him have the kind of the Chinese solo queue experience last year. And then they have Armeo, who, I guess along with Ayla, he's supposed to be the kind of the veteran anchor here, teach the other guys how to be a pro, be kind of a bit of a mentor. I think he's had enough opportunity at the LCS level to prove whether he's really a competitive piece there. And I think, Academy is probably the right level for him. We'll see how that works out. So overall, TL have some pieces. I think Yeon is the player to actually watch for them in terms of a player they can develop and grow with. Beyond that, I think there's not a lot here to be super excited about. And I don't think that this team overall has enough skill to climb high and kind of challenge to win Academy. I give them a B- development grade because there are some pieces they're working towards. And also I want to give them some credit that this is a much more growth-oriented and intentional Academy build than they had in 2020 or in years past. So I think they're going the right direction here. And I do want to give them some credit for that. Up next in what I'm predicting to be 7th place this spring, we have FlyQuest Academy, which is running Kumo, NXI, Triple, Tomo, and Dreams. So a couple pieces here and things you'll recognize. You'll recognize Triple as playing on FlyQuest Academy last split. Kumo is coming over from the EG organization. He played there in LCS for part of the year and then went down to Academy. Dreams is coming out of the LEC. So there's quite a bit of experience here because Triple played in the OPL before coming to Academy last year. But Tomo has only had one split in Academy so far with C9 Academy. And NXI is a brand new face. He was at Scouting Grounds, and he played with 100 Thieves next, replacing Kenvi after Kenvi was promoted up to Academy. So there are some players here, NXI and Tomo specifically, with a lot of room to grow, and then 3 players around them who have had a lot more experience and a lot more opportunity to prove themselves in the past. But Kumo is still, I'd say, a little young. I personally think that NXI and Tomo are the real focus here. And then Dreams is an interesting one because, again, he's coming in as a pretty experienced player who's played at the top level, seems more like somebody to push Diamond and be kind of a backup plan or an insurance option, which I understand why teams do it. It's not why I watch Academy or what I would hope Academy would be for, but I do understand it, and it does make some sense. But NXI, I think he's a really good prospect. Tomo, I think he can... he's one that if he has a big growth year, he could break through and potentially become an LCS player. So there's some things here that are going in good direction. If a couple things work out well, this team could be a pretty good little talent development opportunity. So I'm going to give them a B+ development grade. I think they're heading a pretty good direction. I think there could be a little more opportunity to have one more fresh face in here to push it into that A range, but I think they did a pretty good job putting this together. At 6, I have Golden Guardians. Now, when I was putting this together initially, I kept looking at them and thinking, how good can they be? Can they be better than this? I think they could finish better than 6th. I think they could also drop off a little bit. There's a lot of potential ways that this roster could go. Rosethorn is completely fresh, really. A little bit of amateur experience. Was at Scouting Grounds. Yunbi has no real professional or like high-level competitive experience yet. Chime is still, quite inexperienced, has had a little bit of opportunity so far. Tally is the really big veteran voice here coming out of the OPL, role swapping back to his initial top lane role. And I think this team has a lot of potential, a lot of room to grow, which could mean that they struggle a little bit competitively in spring. But it also could mean that they all click and that the coaching works out really well and that they pop off. I think the main argument for these guys succeeding competitively and maybe doing better than 6th is that, I think Tally could be quite good. And I think mostly Prismal and Chime are going to be one of the better bot lanes in Academy. I think Prismal could be competing for an LCS spot on some teams, potentially even on Golden Guardians, honestly. I think Chime, I'm really high on him and the potential he has. And if either Rosethorn or Yunbi, grows really quickly through the year, there's a lot of potential there as well. I've said before, I think Rosethorn might get an opportunity to get a few games in the LCS and get his feet wet, and I would love to see that. I really like the balance of this roster as a development project because you have Tally as the veteran, but then you have a lot of fresh faces, a little bit of experience and leadership in Chime and Prismal as well. But it's very development-oriented. It fits in with what Golden Guardians are doing as an org. So I'm giving them an A for a development grade. I think they're headed a great direction with this group. So now we get into the top half. And for what it's worth, this middle section of Academy could go so many different directions. Like predicting, even like 2 to 9 is like so impossible, but we're going to put it out there and see how it lands. 5, I have TSM. Now you might look at this and say, wait a second. They have Hauntzer. They have Cody's son, these 2 very experienced LCS players. They have Babip, who is at Worlds. Then they have Sword, their brand new, mid lane prospect. And they have Yerson coming out of the PCS. Although he's not going to be here at the start of the year. They brought in Fizzy as kind of a temporary backup for him. But Yerson is their intended Academy support. So you look at this and you say, how could you have Hauntzer, Babip, Cody's son, and put them 5th in Academy? Well, that's just, it is hard to predict, right? These guys could do a lot better than that. But I also think that the individual player skill level is not the real gap at the Academy level. So I don't think Hauntzer is going to come in here and like destroy a bunch of Academy top laners 1v1. It's more about how the team works well together. I think the mid jungle here is going to not be among the stronger ones in academy at first. Maybe in summer they'll have grown into it a little more. I think it's so hard to judge, especially how an experienced LCS player is going to perform at academy. We've seen players come down like Hooney and Dardoch and just not, apparently it seems like, not take it seriously at all and really perform poorly and be disappointing. We've seen others like Someday come in as the classic example and really destroy everything and like prove like, no, I don't belong in academy. Like give me my opportunity to come back up. I'm not sure which ones we're going to get out of Hanser and Cody's son. But I don't just look at them and put their career experience on and say they're going to be way better than anyone in academy. I think overall this roster is going to be middle of the pack. And as a development project, Sword is, a decent prospect. But obviously Hanser is there purely as like, not purely, there's a little bit of mentorship opportunity, but he's really there as kind of an insurance policy behind Hooney. I don't think Cody's son is ever going to take the spot away from Lost unless things are going really, really badly with TSM on like interpersonal stuff or something like that. Sword is the only, and maybe Yerson a little bit of its pieces that might develop into something more. So I don't think TSM have built a great talent pipeline here, given the opportunity they could have had to bring in a lot more freshness into their roster. I'm giving them a C+. I think they could have done a lot better as a development project. But competitively, they should be able to win a decent share of games. In fourth, I have Dignitas. So speaking of a roster that is much more focused on, players with LCS experience and have a lot of veteran weighting. This is maybe the most veteran weighted roster in academy. One of them at least. You have Lorlo and Acadian. Then you have Yusui, who's been in academy for quite a while trying to break through. You have Spawn, who is, the fresh brand new face here and somebody that I'm personally very excited about to see how he grows over the course of the year. I think he is going to need the full year to grow. But by the end of it, I think there's a potential for him to be a really, really good player. And then you have JJ, who has been seen at the LCS and academy level for a while too. So I think these guys should be able to compete pretty well. I think you have Lorlo and Acadian who are going to be there more for insurance purposes. It seems like I don't love the idea of having Acadian backing up Dardoch. I think if you're going to, especially if Dardoch's the first player you're going to announce that you've signed in the offseason, and then you bring in Acadian behind him or retain Acadian behind him, he's been in the org before. Now you're just putting pressure on Dardoch, a player who I don't think needs to be pressured from the academy level. And you aren't giving yourself that slot to develop a new player. It's one that I don't think makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's going to be beneficial for Dardoch, and I don't think it's going to be beneficial for the academy team relative to having a new player in to develop. Yusui is someone who I generally thought he played pretty well in academy in 2020, but he has had a lot of opportunity for a few years. He does have a shot, if Soligo isn't working out well, to get some games in the LCS, and maybe, he's only had a very small opportunity at the LCS level in the past, so maybe, this is his chance to kind of take over that spot and show that, no, I deserve to be promoted over Soligo. We'll find out. But really, ultimately, I think there's only a pretty small chance that Yusui turns out to be a really good LCS level player, or that he can kind of take that big next step in his development. And it's really all about Spawn as the development potential of this roster. Now, this isn't my take, so I'm not going to purely take credit for it, but there is some potential downside to having so much veteran presence on this roster, in the sense of when you have one real prospect like Spawn coming in completely fresh, and then you've got 4 players who have been playing at the LCS or academy level for so long, they're all going to have a lot of existing patterns, a lot of existing opinions, and relatively loud voices. And I happen to know that Spawn is somebody who's much more of a quiet, not like a vocal leader kind of a personality, which is something he can grow into, but it's going to be pretty hard for Spawn to come in and learn how to be assertive and tell his teammates what he needs, and grow in that area of his game, when he's got, it's going to be so much more comfortable for him to just slot in behind what all of these guys want to do. I'm hoping that doesn't hold back his development, but I think there is some threat of it. So, while I think this team ultimately can compete to be near the top of the academy standings, I give them a C as a development opportunity. I really wish there were 2 more fresh faces here, with 1 or 2 veteran players, not essentially 4 veteran players. And I don't think it's headed the right direction, especially what they're doing at the LCS level, and especially the way they kind of backed into this rather than making it clear that this was the goal of what they're trying to achieve from the start of the offseason and all of that. Number 3, getting into the top end of things, Evil Geniuses. So this one's really, really interesting to me. They have Tony Top, they have Contracts, they have Jojo Pyun, they have Shoryu, and they have Mystiques. This one has one of the most ideal balances, I think, of experience and inexperience that you can get in an academy roster in LCS this year. Tony Top has been around kind of the Chinese and North American scene for a while. He got his Canadian citizenship, so he can be a domestic NA player. And he's just a very, very skilled top laner, loves to carry, play things like Fiora. And he's going to be paired with Contracts, who in his time with Someday last year showed he can be very good at pairing with a top laner and helping him out. So I think that duo, that top jungle duo, is going to be one to watch in Academy this year. Contracts, for his own sake, as kind of a veteran presence here, it almost feels unfair to call him a veteran as a guy who's been there and done that, and you're going to learn from him, because he is still very much an LCS level jungler. And I think he could have continued to play for 100 Thieves this year and been very good for them, or landed with another LCS team. And the fact that he's now in Academy with EG as not only kind of like a really good player to help them win games at the Academy level, to model being a pro to the other new players, but also potentially to be a piece to sell to other orgs later in the year if things aren't going well. Like, this is a great little pickup for them that kind of fell to them. Wasn't their plan A, but as a plan B that came through, like, you feel great about having this guy in your org. Jojo is very raw, very young mid laner, former Fortnite pro, still 16, a guy that's going to take some time. Obviously, you can't even play in the LCS until you're 17, but if he can grow into that, and if he can realize kind of that potential he has, he's very much going to be a player worth watching very closely this year. Shoryu was one of the best bot laners coming out of Amateur last year. He's been a little bit in the scene in the past, but is kind of coming back to it, and I think should be a pretty good stabilizing influence and a player with some potential to grow still on EG. And then Mystiques is coming out of the European national scene. Kind of like Contracts, another player who has a lot of experience, but still room to improve, and not somebody that you would expect to find playing at the Academy level. So it's a little surprising that EG landed these two players as their veterans, who are not only very experienced, but also still very skillful, and have both the benefits of being a veteran and the benefits of being a potential development piece. Obviously, they don't have as much like unrealized potential as someone like Jojo or Tony Top, but they still have some of that. Like this, all 5 of these players have room to grow and improve, which is exactly what you want out of this. So I'm giving them an A for their development grade. I think they've done a fantastic job. I think they're going to be really competitive this year. One of the teams I'm most excited to watch in Academy. Let's get into the top 2. Number 2, I have 100 Thieves. You have Tenacity in the top lane and Kenvi in the jungle. These guys both came from the 100 Thieves Next program last year and were promoted into Academy so that they could be put on contracts that retain them in the organization, because amateur contracts can't extend over the course, over an off-season. So they were protected from basically being poached by other orgs and were promoted, which basically just goes to show you, even if you don't know anything else about them, they had this 100 Thieves Next program, and these are the 2 pieces they said, we're not letting them go. The rest of 100 Thieves Next ended up on other teams, but 100 Thieves kept hold of Tenacity and Kenvi, players with very big potential. And if they were playing behind players other than Someday and Closer, they would have a chance to get into the LCS this year. But they're playing behind Someday and Closer, so we'll see what happens by the end of the year. They have Ryoma, who they downgraded from the LCS roster to Academy, who's just, to me, the main purpose of having Ryoma in Academy is because you're going to win more Academy games and go further in the tournaments and playoffs and so on, which is good for your team to develop. I think he's going to perform really well at the Academy level. I don't think he's going to perform well enough to convince me he deserves an LCS spot again, but maybe, and there's always that potential. I don't think he's a write-off or anything by any means. He's going to be quite a good player at this level. Luger is coming in, being imported. A player I don't know a ton about, but from what I hear, he's quite skilled and is going to help them win some games. And then Poom also had a little bit of experience at the LCS level at the end of 2020, has a ton of room to grow. Seems like a very, very quick learner. And I think this team as a whole is going to compete super well. I think there's a ton of potential here. There is some decent experience as well, but much more weighted towards the potential side of things. And so I think, these guys a year from now are either going to be sold for some pretty big buyouts, or 100 Thieves LCS will blow up and these guys will get promoted. I'm not really sure what might happen at the end of the year, but I think 100 Thieves might end up with a kind of an embarrassment of riches by the end of the year, and then we'll see how it all shakes out after that. I'm giving them an A+ development grade. I think they've got so much depth here. I guess I only wish there was a little more opportunity for this academy depth to realize itself with some LCS promotions, but I just don't think that's viable given the way they've built their org out. But that's the position they put themselves in. So at number 1, I personally feel that Cloud9 Academy is going to be, once again, the best team in Academy this year. They have Zion Spartan, they have Surenfire, they have Copy, they have King, and they have Isles. So King and Isles probably should be the best bot lane in Academy. I think there are a couple that might be able to compete with them and maybe grow into taking over that spot. But especially in the laning phase, King is a great laner. I think Isles is a very good player. You have Copy, who is, the least experienced player in this roster by a pretty long shot. He's coming out of 100 Thieves next. I think he's a pretty good facilitator. I think he's got some really good potential. And so look for him to be kind of playing into the side lanes quite a bit. Helping King be a primary carry, things like that. Zion Spartan has been, was improving again, I'd say, in 2020 in Academy, and showed that he still has potential. He still has some growth. But ultimately, I think he is just really big veteran factor here. And so mentorship kind of a role mostly. Surenfire, I think, got a little bit of a rough shake on Team Liquid in 2020. Looking at it from the outside, I think he could be pretty skillful and could click better, but it is going to depend a lot on how well he clicks with this team. But overall, I think there's a lot of talent in this roster. I think King is an LCS level bot laner. I think Isles is probably an LCS level support. And you have Copy as kind of the development piece in all of that. So all of that being said, there is some potential for growth here. There's kind of one real prospect, but I think there's a little too much weighting towards veterancy. I think the Cloud9 kind of talent pipeline took a step back this offseason when they sold so many pieces like Diamond and Palafox. They promoted Fudge, and they put themselves in the position to do that and to kind of move their talent up or out and profit from it. But they haven't restocked the cupboards that much yet. So I'm giving them a B for a development grade. I think they could have done a little better. I think arguably they would have done a little better if they had held on to Fake God here, who they had very briefly signed in the offseason before selling him on to Dignitas. If they had Fake God instead of Zion Spartan here, maybe this would be a B+. But even so, they're still going to maintain their reputation as an Academy team that you want to play for and think you can win Academy with and grow into LCS from there, which they've managed to do for a lot of players in the past. So I don't think Cloud9 are in a bad position there with their Academy team, but I do think it'd be nice to see them kind of restock the cupboards with a little more youth going forward. And we'll see how their amateur team does in maybe promoting a couple of those guys throughout the year. So those are my rankings and my grades for how the teams have set themselves up. So as a reminder, this is what I expect them to finish as by Proving Grounds in spring. I think CLG, IMT, TL, FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, TSM, Dignitas, EG, 100 Thieves, and Cloud9 first. But I really do think that anything from the 2 to 9 spot, I'm not saying CLG are dedicated 10th, but like pretty much the entire grouping, maybe it's more about 3 to 8, could land almost anywhere. I think there's going to be a very, very close competition throughout the entire split, and I love to see it. And hopefully it'll allow the individual players to shine through a lot more. So let me know what you think of all those rankings, where you would put these teams, which players you're most excited to see. I'll see if maybe I can interview some of them over the course of the split, and I'll have regular coverage of how the teams are and players are actually performing, how much growth I'm seeing, like I did in 2020. And hopefully that'll be helpful for people who can't watch all the Academy games, but I encourage you to watch as many of them as you can. There are a lot of good players in Academy this year, a lot of players with a lot of potential to grow. I'm really happy overall with what the teams have done, even if a couple of them I think could have done a little more or done a little better. And I just think it's going to be a great year for seeing NA talent kind of build more and more of a grassroots movement up in towards putting pressure on the LCS players.